Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we've got something really fascinating to dive into. We are unpacking a source text that asks us to do something pretty unique, to treat historical and theological claims exactly like a legal case. We're going to walk through an evidential analysis of the claims surrounding Muhammad, the final prophet in Islam. But here's the catch. Instead of relying on pure philosophy or abstract theology, the source we're exploring today builds its entire argument on the documented historical record.
So, let's just jump right in. The source kicks things off with a really powerful premise. In a court of law, the standard of evidence is high. Think about it. You can't convict someone based on a gut feeling or an intuition, right? You absolutely need evidence. Evidence that is documented, verifiable, and cross-referenceable. The text applies this exact rigorous standard to a massive historical claim, essentially demanding hard, verifiable proof over mere belief. To navigate this massive legal-style brief, here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the standard of evidence. Then we'll move through empires in history, science and the environment, modern social and tech shifts, the end times narrative, and finally, we'll wrap it all up with the cumulative case. Let's get to it. All right, Exhibit A, the standard of evidence. What's really mind-blowing about this first exhibit is just the sheer scale of the claims being evaluated. The central claim here is that Muhammad was the final prophet. But the evidence? The text lays out over 50 specific, historically verifiable predictions spanning 10 completely different domains of knowledge. The source argues that guessing 50 highly specific, dated predictions across that many distinct disciplines simply cannot be written off as a lucky guess.
Moving on to Exhibit B, Empires, Conquests, and History.
Starting off with geopolitics, the source points out something crucial. These predictions weren't made by some emperor with a massive political apparatus or a network of spies. We were talking about a man living in the 7th century Arabian desert, yet the text maps his statements directly to documented historical events spanning over a millennium. I mean, look at this timeline. From predicting the conquest of the Persian Empire while he was still a persecuted man in Mecca, to predicting a very specific volcanic fire in the Hijaz in 1256, to the 13th century Mongol invasions, the exact 1453 conquest of Constantinople, all the way up to the abolition of the Caliphate in 1924. And the historical record presented in the text just keeps going. The source cross-references even more prophecies with historical fulfillments. We're talking Byzantine territories like Syria, Egypt, and Jerusalem falling within just 20 years, the subsequent Muslim conquest of the Indian subcontinent, modern demographic shifts where non-Arabs vastly outnumber locals in the Gulf states, and of course, the astonishing global reach of a desert religion that now has 1.8 billion adherents today. The sheer volume of geopolitical predictions here is a major focal point for the source. All right, let's shift gears to Exhibit C, Science and the Environment. This is where the source sets up a really fascinating juxtaposition between ancient texts and modern scientific discovery. It notes that the 7th century text from Surah al-Mu'minun uses a very specific word, alaka, which means something that clings, to describe human embryonic development. The source argues that 20th century modern microscopy mirrors this exact anatomical vocabulary, perfectly describing the precise sequence of an embryo implanting, or literally clinging, to the uterine wall. It takes the exact same approach with astrophysics. Take Surah al-Hadid, for instance. It literally translates to stating that iron was sent down from the sky. The text points out that modern geology confirms Earth's iron wasn't actually formed here on our planet. It originated from ancient supernovae and literally arrived from space. So the source argues that this ancient wording perfectly mirrors what we now know through modern science. Now the environmental predictions are just as hyper-specific. Let's just rapid fire through these points from the text. The source maps 7th century descriptions directly to today's ecological reality. We've got the modern technological greening of the Arabian desert, the drying of the Euphrates River revealing massive oil wealth beneath its basin, heavily documented water level drops in the Sea of Galilee, receding rivers in the Tigris and Euphrates revealing submerged ancient cities, and even an increase in major seismic activity that aligns perfectly with modern USGS global records. Next up, Exhibit D, Modern social and tech shifts. So, if history and geology weren't enough, the source argues the text literally predicted the exact framework of our hyper-connected modern world. And the ancient descriptions mirror our daily lives with eerie accuracy. News traveling instantly across the world? That maps right to the internet and social media.
The book in every hand perfectly describes our smartphones, not to mention the total abandonment of riding animals in favor of cars and planes, distant communication via video and telephones, and the specific mention of controlled fire being used to power transportation, which looks a whole lot like modern combustion and jet engines.
And the sociological trends? They're honestly just as striking. The source points out a prophecy about barefoot Bedouin shepherds suddenly competing to build the tallest structures, which, if you look at modern Gulf megacities like Dubai or Riyadh, hits the nail on the head. It notes the prediction of a global financial system where interest, or riba, becomes universally unavoidable. It mentions markets becoming closer, like we see with global supply chains and e-commerce. It even highlights the modern epidemic of loneliness, where family ties are cut and neighbors remain absolute strangers, alongside a severe global mental health crisis where people genuinely wish they hadn't been born.
Which brings us to Exhibit E, the end times narrative. Now, the crucial thing here is how the source ties all of this disparate data together. It doesn't just treat these as random, isolated party tricks. Instead, it frames them as part of an ongoing eschatological countdown. The text categorizes the fulfilled prophecies we've just reviewed as the minor signs. Essentially, this acts as a checklist of over 18 specific observable phenomena, ranging from moral shifts like the breakdown of the nuclear family to massive demographic changes that the source claims are actively fulfilling right now in our current era.
If you follow the source's logical flow, it looks like this. Because Step 1, the historical and scientific prophecies, has been well documented, and because Step 2, the modern social and text signs, are visibly fulfilling all around us today, then the text argues that Step 3 is an inevitable reality. The source asserts that because of this proven track record, the major signs, things like the appearance of the Dajjal, the Mahdi, Jesus, and the Day of Judgment, are rapidly approaching.
Finally, let's look at Exhibit F, the cumulative case. This is where the source transitions from just throwing isolated data points at us to making its ultimate, mathematically grounded argument. And it really all anchors on one specific number, 50. The text points out that, sure, making one or two lucky guesses about the future, that's possible. But 50 specific, verifiable, and independently confirmable predictions, the source argues that the probability of getting this many right by mere chance is just statistically incalculable. To really drive home why guessing all this is so wildly improbable, the source breaks down the distribution of these claims. 30% are political and military, 20% are science and environment, another 30% focus on social and tech shifts, and 20% are religious and economic. The text uses this wide distribution to argue that these predictions span way too many unconnected, distinct fields of knowledge for any single 7th century individual to have just guessed correctly.
So, looking at all this accumulated evidence, the source text basically lays out 3 possible logical deductions for us to evaluate. Deduction 1, he simply guessed 50 times correctly across 10 distinct domains, which the text quickly dismisses as statistically absurd. Deduction 2, he completely fabricated them, and over the course of 1400 years, global history just miraculously accommodated his lies, which the source argues requires an unbelievable, extraordinary coincidence. Or, Deduction 3, he actually received revelation from a divine source that exists outside of space and time.
Ultimately, the logical conclusion presented by the text boils down to this. The sheer volume and absolute specificity of this evidence demands honest reflection. Period. Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, the source argues that this data points to a source of information that is entirely beyond standard human reasoning and capability. We've definitely covered a massive amount of ground today, looking at claims that span well over a millennium. So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative question that the text poses, just to encourage your own deeper exploration. If 50 specific, highly detailed predictions spanning history, science, and modern society have indeed been verified by documented reality, how do we explain the source? Thanks so much for joining us on this explainer, and we will see you next time.